to those who are more fluid and flaunt their difference. Dandies seduce socially as well as sexually. Groups form around them. Their style is wildly imitated. An entire court or crowd will fall in love with them. In adapting the dandy character for your own purposes, remember that the dandy is by nature a rare and beautiful flower. Be different in ways that are both striking and aesthetic, never vulgar. Poke fun at current trends and styles, go in a novel direction, and be supremely uninterested in what anyone else is doing. Most people are insecure. They will wonder what you are up to, and slowly they will come to admire and imitate you because you express yourself with total confidence. Traditionally been defined by clothing, and certainly most dandies create a unique visual style. The most famous dandy of all would spend hours on his toilette, particularly the inimitably styled knot in his necktie, for which he was famous throughout the early 19th century England. But a dandy style cannot be obvious, for dandies are subtle and never try hard for attention. Attention comes to them. The person whose clothes are flagrantly different has little imagination or taste. Dandies show their difference in the little touches that mark their disdain for convention. Théophile Gautier's red vest, Oscar Wilde's green velvet suit, Andy Warhol's silver wigs. The great English Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli had two magnificent canes, one for morning, one for evening. At noon, he would change canes no matter where he was. The female dandy works similarly. She may adopt male clothing, say, but if she does, a touch here or there will set her truly apart. Remember, there must be a reference point. If your visual style is totally unfamiliar, people will think you at best an obvious attention getter, at worst, crazy. Instead, create your own fashion sense by adapting and altering prevailing styles to make yourself an object of fascination. Do this right, and you will be wildly imitated. The Count d'Orsay, a great London dandy of the 1830s and 40s, was closely watched by fashionable people. One day, caught in a sudden London rainstorm, he bought a paltruc, a kind of heavy hooded duffel coat off the back of a Dutch sailor. The paltruc immediately became the coat to wear. Having people imitate you, of course, is a sign of your powers of seduction. The nonconformity of dandies, however, goes far beyond appearances. It is an attitude toward life that sets them apart. Adopt that attitude and a circle of followers will form around you. Dandies are supremely impudent. They don't give a damn about other people and never try to please. In the court of Louis XIV, the writer La Bruyère noticed that courtiers who tried hard to please were invariably on the way down. Nothing was more anti-seductive. As Barbé d'Aurevilly wrote, dandies please women by displeasing them. The insolence of the rake is tied up with his desire to conquer a woman. He cares for nothing else. The insolence of the dandy, on the other hand, is aimed at society and its conventions. It is not a woman he cares to conquer, but a whole group, an entire social world. And since people are generally oppressed by the obligation of always being polite and self-sacrificing, they are delighted to spend time around a person who disdains such niceties. Dandies are masters of the art of living. They live for pleasure, not for work. They surround themselves with beautiful objects and eat and drink with the same relish they show for their clothes. This was how the great Roman writer Petronius, author of the Satyricon, was able to seduce the Emperor Nero. Unlike the dull Seneca, the great Stoic thinker and Nero's tutor, Petronius knew how to make every detail of life a grand aesthetic adventure, from a feast to a simple conversation. This is not an attitude you should impose on those around you. You can't make yourself a nuisance. But if you simply seem socially confident and sure of your taste, people to you. The key is to make everything an aesthetic choice. Your ability to alleviate boredom by making life an art will make your company highly prized. The opposite sex is a strange country we can never know, and this excites us, creates the proper sexual tension. But it is also a source of annoyance and frustration. Men do not understand how women think, and vice versa. Each tries to make the other act more like a member of their own sex. Dandies may never try to please, but in this one area, they have a pleasing effect. By adopting psychological traits of the opposite sex, they appeal to our inherent narcissism. This kind of mental transvestism, the ability to enter the spirit of the opposite sex, adapt to their way of thinking, mirror their tastes and attitudes, can be a key element in seduction. It is a way of mesmerizing your victim. According to Freud, the human libido is essentially bisexual. Most people are in some way attracted to people of their own sex, but social constraints, varying with culture and historical period, repress these impulses. The dandy represents a release from such constraints. In several of Shakespeare's plays, a young girl, back then the female roles in the theater were actually played by male actors, has to go into disguise and dresses up as a boy, eliciting all kinds of sexual interest from men, who are later delighted to find out that the boy is actually a girl. Think, for example, of Rosalind in As You Like It. Entertainers such as Josephine Baker and Marlene Dietrich would dress up as men in their acts, making themselves wildly popular among men. Meanwhile, the slightly feminized male, the pretty boy, has always been seductive to women. Valentino embodied this quality. Elvis Presley had feminine features, the face, the hips, wore frilly pink shirts and eye makeup, and attracted the attention of women early on. The filmmaker Kenneth Anger said of Mick Jagger that it was a bisexual charm which constituted an important part of the attraction he had over young girls and which acted upon their unconscious. In Western culture, for centuries in fact, feminine beauty has been far more fetishized than male beauty, so it is understandable that a feminine-looking face like that of Montgomery Clift would have more seductive power than that of John Wayne. The dandy figure has a place in politics as well. John F. Kennedy was a strange mix of the masculine and feminine. Virile in his toughness with the Russians and in his White House lawn football games, yet feminine in his graceful and dapper appearance. This ambiguity was a large part of his appeal. Do not be misled by the surface disapproval your dandy pose may elicit. Society may publicize its distrust of androgyny. In Christian theology, Satan is often represented as androgynous, but this conceals its fascination. What is most seductive is often what is most repressed. Learn a playful dandyism and you will become the magnet for people's dark, unrealized yearnings. The key to such power is ambiguity. In a society where the roles everyone plays are obvious, the refusal to conform to any standard will excite interest. Be both masculine and feminine, impudent and charming, subtle and outrageous. Let other people worry about being socially acceptable. Those types are a dime a dozen, and you are after a power greater than they can imagine. Children are not as guileless as we like to imagine. They suffer from feelings of helplessness and sense early on the power of their natural charm to remedy their weakness in the adult world. They learn to play a game. If their natural innocence can persuade a parent to yield to their desires in one instance, then it is something they can use strategically in another instance, laying it on thick at the right moment to get their way. If their vulnerability and weakness is so attractive, then it is something they can use for effect. Why are we seduced by children's naturalness? First, because anything natural has an uncanny effect on us. Since the beginning of time, natural phenomena such as lightning storms or eclipses have instilled in human beings an awe tinged with fear. The more civilized we become, the greater the effects such natural events have on us. The modern world surrounds us with so much that is manufactured and artificial that something sudden and inexplicable fascinates us. Children also have this natural power, But because they are unthreatening and human, they are not so much awe-inspiring as charming. Most people try to please, but the pleasantness of the child comes effortlessly, defying logical explanation. And what is irrational is often dangerously seductive. More important, a child represents a world from which we have been forever exiled. Because adult life is full of boredom and compromise, we harbor an illusion of childhood as a kind of golden age, even though it can often be a period of great confusion and pain. It cannot be denied, however, that childhood had certain privileges, and as children, we had a pleasurable attitude to life. Confronted with a particularly charming child, we often feel wistful. We remember our own golden past, the qualities we have lost and wish we had again. And in the presence of the child, we get a little of that goldenness back. Natural seducers are people who somehow avoid getting certain childish traits drummed out of them by adult experience. Such people can be as powerfully seductive as any child, because it seems uncanny and marvelous that they have preserved such qualities. They are not literally like children, of course. That would make them obnoxious or pitiful. Rather, it is the spirit that they have retained. Do not imagine that this childishness is something beyond their control. Natural seducers learn early on the value of retaining a particular quality and the seductive power it contains. They adapt and build upon those childlike traits that they manage to preserve exactly as the child learns to play with its natural charm. This is the key. It is within your power to do the same, since there is lurking within all of us a devilish child straining to be let loose. To do this successfully, you have to be able to let go to a degree, since there is nothing less natural than seeming hesitant. Remember the spirit you once had, without self-consciousness. People are much more forgiving of those who go all the way, who seem uncontrollably foolish, than the half-hearted adult with a childish streak. You were before you became so polite and self-effacing. To assume the role of the natural, mentally position yourself in any relationship as the child, the younger one. The following are the main types of the adult natural. Keep in mind that the greatest natural seducers are often a blend of more than one of these qualities. The innocent. The primary qualities of innocence are weakness and misunderstanding of the world. Innocence is weak because it is doomed to vanish in a harsh, cruel world. The child cannot protect or hold on to its innocence. The misunderstandings come from the child's not knowing about good and evil and seeing everything through uncorrupted eyes. The weakness of children elicits sympathy. Their misunderstandings make us laugh, and nothing is more seductive than a mixture of laughter and sympathy. The adult natural is not truly innocent. It is impossible to grow up in this world and retain total innocence. Yet naturals yearn so deeply to hold on to their innocent outlook, preserve the illusion of innocence. They exaggerate their weakness to elicit the proper sympathy. They act like they still see the world through innocent eyes, which in an adult proves doubly humorous. Conscious. But to be effective, adult naturals must make it seem subtle and effortless. If they are seen as trying to act innocent, it will come across as pathetic. It is better for them to communicate weakness indirectly, through looks and glances, or through the situations they get themselves into, rather than anything obvious. Since this type of innocence is mostly an act, it is easily adaptable for your own purposes. Learn to play natural weaknesses or flaws. The imp. Impish children have a fearlessness that we adults have lost. That is because they do not see the possible consequences of their actions, how some people might be offended, or how they might physically hurt themselves in the process. Imps are brazen, blissfully uncaring. They infect you with their light-hearted spirit. Such children have not yet had their natural energy and spirits scolded out of them by the need to be polite and civil. We envy them. We want to be naughty too. Adult imps are seductive because of how different they are from the rest of us. Breaths of fresh air in a cautious world, they go full throttle as if their impishness were uncontrollable and thus natural. If you play the part, don't worry about offending people now and then. You are too lovable and inevitably they will forgive you. Just don't apologize or look contrite, for that would break the spell. Whatever you say or do, keep a glint in your eye to show that you do not take anything seriously. The wonder. A wonder child has a special, inexplicable talent. A gift for music, for mathematics, for chess, for sport. At work in the field in which they have such prodigal skill, these children seem possessed and their actions effortless. If they are artists or musicians, Mozart types, their work seems to spring from some inborn impulse, requiring remarkably little thought. If it is a physical talent that they are blessed with unusual energy, dexterity, and spontaneity. In both cases, they seem talented beyond their years. This fascinates us. Adult wonders are often former wonder children who have managed remarkably to retain their youthful impulsiveness and improvisational skills. True spontaneity is a delightful rarity, for everything in life conspires to rob us of it. Carefully and deliberately to think about how we look in other people's eyes. To play the wonder, you need some skill that seems easy and natural, along with the ability to improvise. If in fact your skill takes practice, you must hide this and learn to make your work appear effortless. The more you hide the sweat behind, the more natural and seductive it will appear. The undefensive lover. As people get older, they protect themselves against painful experiences by closing themselves off. The price for this is that they grow rigid, physically and mentally. But children are by nature unprotected and open to experience, and this receptiveness is extremely attractive. In the presence of children, we become less rigid, infected with their openness. That is why we want to be around them. Undefensive lovers have somehow circumvented the self-protective process, retaining the playful, receptive spirit of the child. They often manifest this spirit physically. They are graceful and seem to age less rapidly than other people. Of all the natural's character qualities, this one is the most useful. Defensiveness is deadly in seduction. Act defensive, and you'll bring out defensiveness in other people. The undefensive lover, on the other hand, lowers the inhibitions of his or her target, a critical part of seduction. It is important to learn to not react defensively. Bend instead of resist. Be open to influence from others, and they will more easily fall under your spell. The coquette. According to the popular concept, coquettes are consummate teases, experts at arousing desire through a provocative appearance or an alluring attitude. But the real essence of coquettes is in fact their ability to trap people emotionally and to keep their victims in their clutches long after that first titillation of desire. This is the skill that puts them in the ranks of the most effective seducers. Their success may seem somewhat odd, since they are essentially cold and distant creatures. Should you ever get to know one well, you will sense his or her inner core of detachment and self-love. It may seem logical that once you become aware of this quality, you will see through the coquette's manipulations and lose interest. But more often, we see the opposite. To understand the peculiar power of the coquette, you must first understand a critical property of love and desire. The more obviously you pursue a person, the more likely you are to chase them away. Too much attention can be interesting for a while, but it soon grows cloying and finally becomes claustrophobic and frightening. It signals weakness and neediness, an unseductive combination. How often we make this mistake, thinking our persistent presence will reassure. But coquettes have an inherent understanding of this particular dynamic. Masters of selective withdrawal, they hint at coldness, absenting themselves at times to keep their victim off balance, surprised, intrigued. Their withdrawals make them mysterious, and we build them up in our imaginations. Familiarity, on the other hand, undermines what we have built. A bout of distance engages the emotions further. Instead of making us angry, it makes us insecure. Perhaps they don't really like us. Perhaps we've lost their interest. Once our vanity is at stake, we succumb to the coquette just to prove we are still desirable. Remember, the essence of the coquette lies not in the tease and temptation, but in the subsequent step back, the emotional withdrawal. That is the key to enslaving desire. To adopt the power of the coquette, you must understand one other quality: narcissism. Sigmund Freud characterized the narcissistic woman, most often obsessed with her appearance, as the type with the greatest effect on men. As children, he explains, we pass through a narcissistic phase that is immensely pleasurable. Happily self-contained and self-involved, we have little psychic need of other people. Then, slowly, we are socialized and taught to pay attention to others, but we secretly yearn for those blissful early days. The narcissistic woman reminds a man of that period and makes him envious. Perhaps contact with her will restore that feeling of self-involvement. A man is also challenged by the female coquette's independence. He wants to be the one to make her dependent, to burst her bubble. It is far more likely, though, that he will end up becoming her slave, giving her incessant attention to gain her love, and failing. For the narcissistic woman is not emotionally needy. She is self-sufficient. And this is surprisingly seductive. Self-esteem is critical in seduction. Your attitude toward yourself is read by the other person in subtle and unconscious ways. Low self-esteem repels. Confidence and self-sufficiency attract. The less you seem to need other people, the more likely others will be drawn to you. Understand the importance of this in all relationships, and you will find your neediness easier to suppress. But do not confuse self-absorption with seductive narcissism. Talking endlessly about yourself is eminently anti-seductive, revealing not self-sufficiency, but insecurity. The coquette is traditionally thought of as female, and certainly the strategy was for centuries one of the few weapons women had to engage and enslave a man's desire. One ploy of the coquette is the withdrawal of sexual favors, and we see women using this trick throughout history. The great 17th century French courtesan Ninon de l'Enclos was desired by all the preeminent men of France, but only attained real power when she made it clear that she would no longer sleep with a man as part of her duty. This drove her admirers to despair, which she knew how to make worse by favoring a man temporarily, granting him access to her body for a few months, then returning him to the pack of the unsatisfied. Queen Elizabeth I of England took coquettishness to the extreme, deliberately arousing the desire of her courtiers, but sleeping with none of them. Long a tool of social power for women, coquettishness was slowly adapted by men, particularly the great seducers of the 17th and 18th centuries who envied the power of such women. Today, coquetry is genderless. In a world that discourages direct confrontation, teasing, coldness, and selective aloofness are a form of indirect power that brilliantly disguises its own aggression. The coquette must first and foremost be able to excite the target of his or her attention. The attraction can be sexual, the lure of celebrity, whatever it takes. At the same time, the coquette sends contrary signals that stimulate contrary responses, plunging the victim into confusion. Remember, obvious flirting will reveal your intentions too clearly. Better to be ambiguous and even contradictory. frustrating at the same time that you stimulate. Coquetry depends on developing a pattern to keep the other person off balance. The strategy is extremely effective. Experiencing a pleasure once, we yearn to repeat it. So the coquette gives us pleasure, then withdraws it. The alternation of heat and cold is the most common pattern and has several variations. The 8th century Chinese coquette Yang Guifei totally enslaved the Emperor Ming Huang through a pattern of kindness and bitterness. Having charmed him with kindness, she would suddenly get angry, blaming him harshly for the slightest mistake. Unable to live without the pleasure she gave him, the emperor would turn the court upside down to please her when she was angry or upset. Her tears had a similar effect. What had he done? Why was she so sad? He eventually ruined himself and his kingdom by trying to keep her happy. Tears, anger, and the production of guilt are all the tools of the coquette. A similar dynamic appears in a lover's quarrel. When a couple fights, then reconciles, the joys of reconciliation only make the attachment stronger. Sadness of any sort is also seductive, particularly if it seems deep-rooted, even spiritual. Rather than needy or pathetic, it makes people come to you. Coquettes are never jealous. That would undermine their image of fundamental self-sufficiency, but they are masters at inciting jealousy. By paying attention to a third party, creating a triangle of desire, they signal to their victims that they may not be that interested. This triangulation is extremely seductive in social contexts as well as erotic ones. Interested in narcissistic women, Freud was a narcissist himself, and his aloofness drove his disciples crazy. They even had a name for it, his God complex. Behaving like a kind of messiah, too lofty for petty emotions, Freud always maintained a distance between himself and his students, hardly ever inviting them over for dinner, say, and keeping his private life shrouded in mystery. Yet he would occasionally choose an acolyte to confide in: Carl Jung, Otto Rank, Lou Andreas Salome. The result was that his disciples went berserk trying to win his favor, to be the one he chose. Their jealousy when he suddenly favored one of them only increased his power over them. People's natural insecurities are heightened in group settings. By maintaining aloofness, coquettes start a competition to win their favor. If the ability to use third parties to make targets jealous is a critical seductive skill, Sigmund Freud was a grand coquette. All of the tactics of the coquette have been adapted by political leaders to make the public fall in love. While exciting the masses, these leaders remain inwardly detached, which keeps them in control. Napoleon played the coquette with the French. After the grand successes of the Italian campaign had made him a beloved hero, he left France to conquer Egypt, knowing that in his absence, the government would fall apart, the people would hunger for his return, and their love would serve as the base for an expansion of his power. After exciting the masses with a rousing speech, Mao Zedong would disappear from sight for days on end, making himself an object of cultish worship. More of a coquette than Yugoslav leader Joseph Tito, who alternated between distance from and emotional identification with his people. All of these political leaders were confirmed narcissists. In times of trouble, when people feel insecure, the effect of such political coquetry is even more powerful. It is important to realize that coquetry is extremely effective on a group, stimulating jealousy, love, and intense devotion. If you play such a role with a group, remember to keep an emotional and physical distance. This will allow you to cry and laugh on command, project self-sufficiency, and with such detachment, you will be able to play people's emotions like a piano. The charmer. Sexuality is extremely disruptive. The insecurities and emotions it stirs up can often cut short a relationship that would otherwise be deeper and longer lasting. The charmer's solution is to fulfill the aspects of sexuality that are so alluring and addictive, The focused attention, the boosted self-esteem, the pleasurable wooing, the understanding, real or illusory. Subtract the sex itself. It's not that the charmer represses or discourages sexuality. Lurking beneath the surface of any attempt at charm is a sexual tease, a possibility. Charm cannot exist without a hint of sexual tension. It cannot be maintained, however, unless sex is kept at bay or in the background. The word charm comes from the Latin carmen, a song, but also an incantation tied to the casting of a magical spell. The charmer implicitly grasps this history, casting a spell by giving people something that holds their attention, that fascinates them. And the secret to capturing people's attention while lowering their powers of reason is to strike at the things they have the least control over, their ego, their vanity, and their self-esteem. As Benjamin Disraeli said, talk to a man about himself, and he will listen for hours. The strategy can never be obvious. Subtlety is the charmer's great skill. If the target is to be kept from seeing through the charmer's efforts and from growing suspicious, maybe even tiring of the attention, a light touch is essential. The charmer is like a beam of light that doesn't play directly on a target, but throws a pleasantly diffused glow over it. Charm can be applied to a group as well as to an individual. A leader can charm the public. The dynamic is similar. The following are the laws of charm. Make your target the center of attention. Charmers fade into the background. Their targets become the subject of their interest. To be a charmer, you have to learn to listen and observe. Talk, revealing themselves in the process. As you find out more about them, their strengths, and more important, their weaknesses, you can individualize your attention, appealing to their specific desires and needs, tailoring your flatteries to their insecurities. By adapting to their spirit and empathizing with their woes, you can make them feel bigger and better, validating their sense of self-worth. Make them the star of the show, and they will become addicted to you and grow dependent on you. Make gestures of self-sacrifice, no matter how fake, to show the public that you share their pain and are working in their interest, self-interest being the public form. Be a source of pleasure. No one wants to hear about your problems and troubles. Listen to your target's complaints, but more important, their problems by giving them pleasure. Do this often enough and they will fall under your spell. Being lighthearted and fun is always more charming than being serious and critical. An energetic presence is likewise more charming than lethargy, which hints at boredom, an enormous social taboo. And elegance and style will usually win out over vulgarity, since most people like to associate themselves with whatever they think elevated and cultured. In politics, provide illusion and myth rather than reality. Instead of asking people to sacrifice for the greater good, talk of grand moral issues. An appeal that makes people feel good will translate into votes and power. Bring antagonism into harmony. The court is a cauldron of resentment and envy, where sourness can quickly turn into a conspiracy. The charmer knows how to smooth out conflict. Never stir up antagonisms that will prove immune to your charm. In the face of those who are aggressive, retreat. Let them have their little victories. Yielding and indulgence will charm the fight out of any potential enemies. Never criticize people overtly. That will make them insecure and resistant to change. Plant ideas. Insinuate suggestions. Charmed by your diplomatic skills, people will not notice your growing power. Lull your victims into ease and comfort. Charm is like the hypnotist's trick with the swinging watch. The more relaxed the target, the easier it is to bend him or her to your will. The key to making your victims feel comfortable is to mirror them, adapt to their moods. People are narcissists. They are drawn to those most similar to themselves. Seem to share their values and tastes to understand their spirit, and they will fall under your spell. This works particularly well if you're an outsider, showing that you share the values of your adopted group or country, you have learned their language, you prefer their customs, etc., is immensely charming, since for you this preference is a choice, not a question of birth. Never pester or be overly persistent. These uncharming qualities will disrupt the relaxation you need to cast your spell. Show calm and self-possession in the face of adversity. Adversity and setbacks actually provide the perfect setting for charm. Showing a calm, unruffled exterior in the face of unpleasantness puts people at ease. You seem patient, as if waiting for destiny to deal you a better card, or as if you were confident you could charm the fates themselves. Never show anger, ill temper, or vengefulness, all disruptive emotions that will make people defensive. In the politics of large groups, welcome adversity as a chance to show the charming qualities of magnanimity and poise. Let others get flustered and upset. The contrast will redound to your favor. Never whine, never complain, never try to justify yourself. Make yourself useful. If done subtly, your ability to enhance the lives of others will be devilishly seductive. Your social skills will prove important here, creating a wide network of allies who will give you the power to link people up with each other, which will make them feel that by knowing you, they can make their lives easier. This is something no one can resist. Follow-through is key. So many people will charm by promising a person great things, a better job, a new contact, a big favor. But if they do not follow through, they make enemies instead of friends. Anyone can make a promise. What sets you apart and makes you charming is your ability to come through in the end, following up your promise with a definite action. Conversely, if favor, show your gratitude concretely. In a world of bluff and smoke, real action and true helpfulness are perhaps the ultimate charm. The charismatic. Charisma is seduction on a mass level. Charismatics make crowds of people fall in love with them, then lead them along. The process of making them fall in love is simple and follows a path similar to that of a one-on-one seduction. Charismatics have certain qualities that are powerfully attractive and that make them stand out. This could be their self-belief, their boldness, their serenity. They keep the source of these qualities mysterious. They do not explain where their confidence or contentment comes from, but it can be felt by everyone, without the appearance of conscious effort. The face of the charismatic is usually animated, full of energy, desire, alertness, the look of a lover, one that is instantly appealing, even vaguely sexual. We happily follow charismatics because we like to be led, particularly by people who promise adventure or prosperity. We lose ourselves in their cause, become emotionally attached to them, feel more alive by believing in them. We fall in love. Charisma plays on repressed sexuality, creates an erotic charge. Yet the origins of the word lie not in sexuality, but in religion. And religion remains deeply embedded in modern charisma. Thousands of years ago, people believed in gods and spirits, but few could ever say that they had witnessed a miracle, a physical demonstration of divine power. A man, however, who seemed possessed by a divine spirit, speaking in tongues, ecstatic raptures, the expression of intense visions, would stand out as one whom the gods had singled out. And this man, a priest or a prophet, gained great power over others. What made the Hebrews believe in Moses, follow him out of Egypt, and remain loyal to him despite their endless wandering in the desert? The look in his eye, his inspired and inspiring words, the face that literally glowed when he came down from Mount Sinai, all these things gave him the appearance of having direct communication with God and were the source of his authority. And these were what was meant by charisma, a Greek word referring to prophets and to Christ himself. In early Christianity, charisma was a gift or talent vouchsafed by God's grace and revealing his presence. Most of the great religions were founded by a charismatic, a person who physically displayed the signs of God's favor. Over the years, the world became more rational. Eventually, people came to hold power not by divine right, but because they won votes or proved their competence. The great early 20th century German sociologist Max Weber, however, noticed that despite our supposed progress, there were more charismatics than ever. What characterized a modern charismatic, according to Weber, was the appearance of an extraordinary quality in their character, the equivalent of a sign of God's favor. How else to explain the power of a Robespierre or a Lenin? More than anything else, it was the force of their magnetic personalities that made these men stand out and was the source of their power. They did not speak of God, but of a great cause, visions of a future society. Their appeal was emotional. They seemed possessed. And their audiences reacted as euphorically as earlier audiences had to a prophet. When Lenin died in 1924, a cult formed around his memory, transforming the communist leader into a deity. Today, anyone who has presence, who attracts attention when he or she enters a room, is said to possess charisma. But even these less exalted types reveal a trace of the qualities suggested by the word's original meaning. Their charisma is mysterious and inexplicable, never obvious. They have an unusual confidence. They have a gift, often a smoothness with language, that makes them stand out from the crowd. They express a vision. We may not realize it, but in their presence, we have a kind of religious experience. We believe in these people without having any rational evidence for doing so. When trying to concoct an effective charisma, never forget the religious source of its power. You must radiate an inward quality that has a saintly or spiritual edge to it. Your eyes must glow with the fire of a prophet. Your charisma must seem natural, as if it came from something mysteriously beyond your control, a gift of the gods. In our rational, disenchanted world, people crave a religious experience, particularly on a group level. Any sign of charisma plays to this desire to believe in something. And there is nothing more seductive than giving people something to believe in and follow. Charisma must seem mystical, but that doesn't mean you can't learn certain tricks that will enhance the charisma you already possess or will give you the outward appearance of it. The following are basic qualities that will help create the illusion of charisma. Purpose. If people believe you have a plan, that you know where you're going, they will follow you instinctively. The direction does not matter. Pick a cause, an ideal, a vision, and show that you will not sway from your goal. People will imagine that your confidence comes from something real, just as the ancient Hebrews believed Moses was in communion with God simply because he showed the outward signs. Purposefulness is doubly charismatic in times of trouble. Since most people hesitate before taking bold action, even when action is what is required, single-minded self-assurance will make you the focus of attention. People will believe in you through the simple force of your character. Mystery. Mystery lies at charisma's heart, but it is a particular kind of mystery, a mystery expressed by contradiction. The charismatic may be both proletarian and aristocratic, both cruel and kind, both excitable and icily detached, both intimate and distant. Since most people are predictable, the effect of these contradictions is devastatingly charismatic. They make you hard to fathom, add richness to your character, make people talk about you. It is often better to reveal your contradictions slowly and subtly. If you throw them out one on top of the other, people may think that you have an erratic personality. Show your mysteriousness gradually, and word will spread. You must also keep people at arm's length to keep them from figuring you out. Another aspect of mystery is a hint of the uncanny. The appearance of prophetic or psychic gifts will add to your aura. Predict things authoritatively, and people will often imagine that what you have said has come true. Saintliness. Most of us must compromise constantly to survive. Saints do not. They must live out their ideals without caring about the consequences. The saintly effect bestows charisma. Saintliness goes far beyond religion. Politicians as disparate as George Washington and Lenin won saintly reputations by living simply, despite their power, by matching their political values to their personal lives. Both men were virtually deified after they died. Albert Einstein, too, had a saintly aura. Childlike, unwilling to compromise, lost in his own world. The key is that you must already have some deeply held values. That part cannot be faked, at least not without risking accusations of charlatanry that will destroy your charisma in the long run. The next step is to show as simply and subtly as possible that you live what you believe. Finally, the appearance of being mild and unassuming can eventually turn into charisma, as long as you seem completely comfortable with it. The source of Harry Truman's charisma, and even of Abraham Lincoln's, was to appear to be an everyman. Eloquence. A charismatic relies on the power of words. The reason is simple. Words are the quickest way to create emotional disturbance. They can uplift, elevate, stir anger without referring to anything real. During the Spanish Civil War, Dolores Gómez Ibarruri, known as La Pasionaria, gave pro-communist speeches that were so emotionally powerful as to determine several key moments in the war. To bring off this kind of eloquence, it helps if the speaker is as emotional, as caught up in words as the audience is. Yet eloquence can be learned. The devices La Pasionaria used, catchwords, slogans, rhythmic repetitions, phrases for the audience to repeat, can easily be acquired. Roosevelt, a calm patrician type, was able to make himself a dynamic speaker, both through his style of delivery, which was slow and hypnotic, and through his brilliant use of imagery, alliteration, and biblical rhetoric. The crowds at his rallies were often moved to tears. The slow, authoritative style is often more effective than passion in the long run, for it is more subtly spellbinding and less tiring. Theatricality. A charismatic is larger than life, has extra presence. Actors have studied this kind of presence for centuries. They know how to stand on a crowded stage and command attention. Surprisingly, it is not the actor who screams the loudest or gestures the most wildly who works this magic best, but the actor who stays calm, radiating self-assurance. The effect is ruined by trying too hard. It is essential to be self-aware, to have the ability to see yourself as others see you. De Gaulle understood that self-awareness was key to his charisma. In the most turbulent circumstances, the Nazi occupation of France, the national reconstruction after World War II, an army rebellion in Algeria, he retained an Olympian composure that played beautifully against the hysteria of his colleagues. When he spoke, no one could take their eyes off him. Once you know how to command attention this way, heighten the effect by appearing in ceremonial and ritual events that are full of exciting imagery, making you look regal and godlike. Flamboyancy has nothing to do with charisma. It attracts the wrong kind of attention. Uninhibitedness. Most people are repressed and have little access to their unconscious, a problem that creates opportunities for the charismatic, who can become a kind of screen on which others project their secret fantasies and longings. You will first have to show that you are less inhibited than your audience. that you radiate a dangerous sexuality, have no fear of death, are delightfully spontaneous. Even a hint of these qualities will make people think you are more powerful than you are. In the 1850s, a bohemian American actress, Ada Isaacs Menken, took the world by storm through her unbridled sexual energy and her fearlessness. She would appear on stage half naked, performing death-defying acts. Few women could dare such things in the Victorian period, and a rather mediocre actress became a figure of cult-like adoration. An extension of your being uninhibited is a dreamlike quality in your work and character that reveals your openness to your unconscious. It was the possession of this quality that transformed artists like Wagner and Picasso into charismatic idols. Its cousin is a fluidity of body and spirit. While the repressed are rigid, charismatics have an ease and adaptability that show their openness to experience. Fervency. You need to believe in something, and to believe in it strongly enough for it to animate all your gestures and make your eyes light up. This cannot be faked. Politicians inevitably lie to the public. What distinguishes charismatics is that they believe their own lies, which makes them that much more believable. A prerequisite for fiery belief is some great cause to rally around, a crusade. Become the rallying point for people's discontent and show that you share none of the doubts that plague normal humans. In 1490, the Florentine Girolamo Savonarola railed at the immorality of the Pope and the Catholic Church. Claiming to be divinely inspired, he became so animated during his sermons that hysteria would sweep the crowd. Savonarola developed such a following that he briefly took over the city until a pope had him captured and burned at the stake. People believed in him because of the depth of his conviction. His example has more relevance today than ever. People are more and more isolated and long for communal experience. Let your own fervent and contagious faith in virtually anything give them something to believe in. Vulnerability. Charismatics display a need for love and affection. They are open to their audience and, in fact, feed off its energy. The audience, in turn, is electrified by the charismatic, the current increasing as it passes back and forth. This vulnerable side to charisma softens the self-confident side, which can seem fanatical and frightening. Since charisma involves feelings akin to love, you in turn must reveal your love for your followers. This component to the charisma that Marilyn Monroe radiated on camera. I knew I belonged to the public, she wrote in her diary, and to the world, not because I was talented or even beautiful, but because I had never belonged to anything or anyone else. The public was the only family, the only Prince Charming, and the only home I had ever dreamed of. In front of a camera, Monroe suddenly came to life, flirting with and exciting her unseen public. If the audience does not sense this quality in you, they will turn away from you. On the other hand, you must never seem manipulative or needy. Imagine your public as a single person whom you are trying to seduce. Nothing is more seductive to people than the feeling that they are desired. Adventurousness. Charismatics are unconventional. They have an air of adventure and risk that attracts the bored. Be brazen and courageous in your actions. Be seen taking risks for the good of others. Napoleon made sure his soldiers saw him at the cannons in battle. Lenin walked openly on the streets despite the death threats he had received. Charismatics thrive in troubled waters. A crisis situation allows them to flaunt their daring, which enhances their aura. John F. Kennedy came to life in dealing with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Charles de Gaulle when he confronted rebellion in Algeria. They needed these problems to seem charismatic, and in fact, some have even accused them of stirring up situations. Kennedy, through his brinkmanship style of diplomacy, for instance, that played to their love of adventure. Show heroism to give yourself a charisma that will last you a lifetime. Conversely, the slightest sign of cowardice or timidity for charisma you had. Magnetism. If any physical attribute is crucial in seduction, it is the eyes. They reveal excitement, tension, detachment without a word being spoken. Indirect communication is critical in seduction and also in charisma. The demeanor of charismatics may be poised and calm, but their eyes are magnetic. They have a piercing gaze that disturbs their target's emotions, exerting force without words or action. Fidel Castro's aggressive gaze can reduce his opponents to silence. When Benito Mussolini was challenged, he would roll his eyes, showing the whites in a way that frightened people. President Sukarno of Indonesia had a gaze that seemed as if it could have read thoughts. Roosevelt could dilate his pupils at will, making his stare both hypnotizing and intimidating. The eyes of the charismatic never show fear or nerves. All of these skills are acquirable. The key is self-control. The look does not necessarily have to be aggressive. It can show contentment. Remember, your eyes can emanate charisma, but they can also give you away as a faker. Do not leave such an important attribute to chance. Practice the effect you desire. The star. Of all the character types, the star is perhaps the most powerful of all. People are divided by all kinds of consciously recognized categories: race, gender, class, religion, politics. It is impossible then to gain power on a grand scale or to win an election by drawing on conscious awareness. An appeal to any one group will only alienate another. Unconsciously, however, there is much we share. All of us are mortal. All of us know fear. All of us have been stamped with the imprint of parent figures. And nothing conjures up this shared experience more than myth. The patterns of myth, born out of warring feelings of helplessness on the one hand and thirst for immortality on the other, are deeply engraved in us all. Stars are figures of myth come to life. To appropriate their power, you must first study their physical presence, how they adopt a distinctive style, are cool and visually arresting. Then you must assume the pose of a mythic figure: the rebel, the wise patriarch, the adventurer. The pose of a star who has struck one of these mythic poses might do the trick. Make these connections vague. They should never be obvious to the conscious mind. Your words and actions should invite interpretation beyond their surface appearance. You should seem to be dealing not with specific nitty-gritty issues and details, but with matters of life and death, love and hate, authority and chaos. Your opponent, similarly, should be framed not merely as an enemy for reasons of ideology or competition, but as a villain, a demon. People are hopelessly susceptible to myth. So make yourself the hero of a great drama and keep your distance. Let people identify with you without being able to touch you. They can only watch and dream. Experience the uncanny in waking life. In a déjà vu, a miraculous coincidence, a weird event that recalls a childhood experience. People can have a similar effect. The gestures, the words, the very being of men like Kennedy or Andy Warhol, for example, evoke both the real and the unreal. We may not realize it, and how could we really? But they are like dream figures to us. They have qualities that anchor them in reality: sincerity, playfulness, sensuality. But at the same time, their aloofness, their superiority, and their almost surreal quality makes them seem like something out of a movie. These types have a haunting, obsessive effect on people. Whether in public or in private, they seduce us, making us want to possess them both physically and psychologically. But how can we possess a person from a dream, or a movie star, or a political star who may cross our path? Unable to have them, we become obsessed with them. They haunt our thoughts, our dreams, our fantasies. We imitate them unconsciously. The psychologist Sandor Ferenczi calls this introjection. Another person becomes part of our ego. We internalize their character. The Star is a creation of modern cinema. That is no surprise. Film recreates the dream world. We watch a movie in the dark in a semi-somnolent state. The images are real enough, and to varying degrees depict realistic situations, but they are projections, flickering lights, images. We know they are not real. It's as if we were watching someone else's dream. It was the cinema, not the theater, that created the Star. On a theater stage, actors are far away, lost in a crowd, too real in their bodily presence. What enabled film to manufacture the Star was the close-up, which suddenly separates actors from their contexts, filling your mind with their image. The close-up seems to reveal something not so much about the character they're playing, but about themselves. We glimpse something of Greta Garbo herself when we look so closely into her face. Never forget this while fashioning yourself as a star. First, you must have such a large presence that you can fill your target's mind the way a close-up fills the screen. You must have a style or presence that makes you stand out from everyone else. Be vague and dreamlike, yet not distant or absent. You don't want people to be unable to focus on or remember you. They have to be seeing you in their minds when you're not there. Second, cultivate a blank, mysterious face, the center that radiates starness. This allows people to read into you whatever they want to, imagining they can see your character, even your soul. Instead of signaling moods and emotions, instead of emoting or over-emoting, the Star draws in interpretations. That is the obsessive power in the face of Garbo or Dietrich, or even of Kennedy, who molded his expressions on James Dean's. A living thing is dynamic and changing, while an object or image is passive, but in its passivity, it stimulates our fantasies. A person can gain that power by becoming a kind of object. A star must stand out, and this may involve a certain dramatic flair. Sometimes, though, a more haunting, dreamlike effect can be created by subtle touches. The way you smoke a cigarette, or vocal inflection, a way of walking. It is often the little things that get under people's skin and make them imitate you. The lock of hair over Veronica Lake's right eye, Cary Grant's voice, Kennedy's ironic smile. Although these nuances may barely register to the conscious mind, subliminally, they can be as attractive as an object with a striking shape or odd color. Unconsciously, we are strangely drawn to things that have no meaning beyond their fascinating appearance. Stars make us want to know more about them. You must learn to stir people's curiosity by letting them glimpse something in your private life, something that seems to reveal an element of your personality. Let them fantasize and imagine. A trait that often triggers this reaction is a hint of spirituality, which can be devilishly seductive, like James Dean's interest in Eastern philosophy and the occult. Hints of goodness and big-heartedness can have a similar effect. Stars are like the gods on Mount Olympus who live for love and play. The things you love, people, hobbies, animals, reveal the kind of moral beauty that people like to see in a star. Exploit this desire by showing people peaks of your private life, the causes you fight for, the person you are in love with, for the moment. Another way stars seduce is by making us identify with them, giving us a vicarious thrill. The key is to represent a type, as Jimmy Stewart represented the quintessential Middle American, Cary Grant the smooth aristocrat. People of your type will gravitate to you, identify with you, share your joy or pain. The attraction must be unconscious, conveyed not in your words, but in your pose, your attitude. Now, more than ever, people are insecure and their identities are in flux. Help them fix on a role to play in life, and they will flock to identify with you. Simply make your type dramatic, noticeable, and easy to imitate. The power you have in influencing people's sense of self in this manner is insidious and profound.